coverage you can count on. KOMU 8 News starts now.
Well, the message is the same, but this time the chants are happening at a protest organized by a Columbia teenager fresh out of high school. The temperatures in the low 90s tonight, but that did not stop hundreds of protesters from showing up once again. Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Spain. Thanks for joining us. It was another night of peaceful protesting in downtown Columbia. KOMU 8's Noah Klein was at tonight's protest. He joins us now from the newsroom. And Noah, what was the feeling out there tonight?
Emily, there was truly nothing stopping protesters tonight. Even those high temperatures that you mentioned, hundreds of people showed up for another peaceful protest in downtown Columbia tonight. This one organized by a recent Rockbridge High School graduate. I spoke with the organizer about her motivation to start tonight's protest. She said during her time at Rockbridge and growing up in Columbia, she saw a lot of racism. Over 1,000 people registered on Facebook to attend tonight, and she says it all started as a simple conversation.
This started as a conversation between me and my friend Ruth. It was just sort of me saying, I feel like nothing student-led has really been brought up, and we can use our voices to do something. And then it just gradually became a conversation between two people, and then a group me chat of like 16 people, and then now this.
There were several hundred people again at tonight's protest, and some of them were even downtown passing out things like water, hand sanitizer, even masks, of course, for protection against COVID-19. As for advice for young people, Melissa says she wants them to use their voice. Reporting in the newsroom, Noah Klein, KOMU 8 News.
Okay, thanks, Noah. Today, Governor Parson addressed continuing protests against racial injustice in the state. He thanked protesters for keeping everything peaceful. This was video from previous protests in Columbia. He also mentioned the Missouri National Guard is back in the state after spending time in Washington, D.C. Parson, a former sheriff himself, thanked law enforcement for keeping Missourians safe. The governor also talked about efforts to reduce law enforcement funding.
Doing away with police officers, law enforcement officers, is not an answer for anything. You want to change the way we do business? You want to make things better? We can all do better. I can do better as governor. Law enforcement, never hurts to learn, can do better also.
Protesters all across the country have also asked for a reduction of funding for police departments. A Columbia nonprofit has seen a spike in membership and donations during these protests. Race Matters Friends tells us it's seen more than 500 new subscribers in just the past week. The group's mission is racial equality, and it's also getting business support. The Sycamore restaurant donated a week's worth of cocktail sales, about $2,000 to the nonprofit, and Ragtag Cinema donated a portion of its June virtual cinema sales as well. The group's president hopes support continues beyond just this.
My question to everyone is, what are you going to do after the protest? You can march, but then you have to be engaged for movement.
Donations go to the group's community bail fund as well as other projects. Well, even though summer break has just started, Columbia Public Schools is looking ahead to the fall, and today parents are reacting to their plan. CPS sent out a letter on Monday giving parents the option for their kids to attend school online or in person for the upcoming academic year. Students will have checkpoints throughout the year and given the option to switch to online if needed. Students will practice social distancing in classrooms by spacing out desks, having assigned seats, and eating lunch in class. Students will not be able to leave the classroom space without permission, and CPS plans to create stable groups to control any potential exposure of COVID-19. But some parents feel these changes may be too much.
I think trying to do that, the middle school and especially the high school level, is going to be really, really tough, because I have a hard time imagining that you have enough students that have the exact same class schedule.
I feel disappointed that that's what might have to happen, but I do understand that those smaller groups are going to be safer and it'll be easier to track.
Parents can expect to receive more information about re-entry by about June 22nd and be asked to pick their selection then.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was a line of showers and thunderstorms possible, and we were really watching this northwestern area, and we have seen some of those pop up. Luckily, we're not seeing those severe at this point, but if you look here, there are some heavy downpours in Macon County this hour, and there is no hail either shown up on the hail scope. There is a little bit of lightning here, though, too, so some lightning coming down, but otherwise just some downpours, heavier downpours coming down. You can see our temperatures are still very warm, as we mentioned earlier. Our temperatures are still in the lower and middle 80s here at 10 o'clock at night, and we do still have a heat index as well. This is our feel-like temperature, still around 90 degrees for a lot of us. In the upper 90s, what we're feeling like. Now, we do have cooler temperatures tomorrow. In fact, we're going to be in the 60s pretty much all day. We have more chances for rain and a lot of wind. Tracking that hour by hour in the First Alert full forecast coming up. Emily.
Okay, thanks, Kenton. 15 days after he died, George Floyd has been laid to rest in Houston. The private service was streamed to hundreds of thousands watching across the country and around the world. NBC's Jay Gray reports from the Fountain of Praise Church in Houston.
Tonight, George Floyd is finally home.
It's time for us to celebrate his life. We may weep, we may mourn, we'll be comforted, and we will find hope.
Hope shared by a nation. Images of tens of thousands marching across the country and around the world. Evidence of his impact and legacy.
We honor him today because when he took his last breath, the rest of us will now be able to breathe. God is with us.
But for Floyd's family, breaths are difficult to gather right now.
All I think about is when he was yelling for mama.
Their hearts are heavy. Their loss overwhelming.
I just want to say to him, I love you, and I thank God for giving me my own personal Superman.
A superhero to so many here, whose message and mission doesn't end with his passing.
Out of his death has come a movement, a worldwide movement.
But on this day, the movement pauses, if only for a few hours, to honor his memory. Jay Gray, NBC News, Houston.
George Floyd arrived at his final resting place this afternoon. A horse-drawn carriage carried the golden casket the final mile to the cemetery where he's being laid to rest next to his mother. Continued nationwide protests are calling for cities to defund the police. Today, leaders on both sides weighed in on the topic. While Democrats haven't voiced their support of defunding police departments, they are pushing a bill that bans chokeholds, no-knock warrants, and making lynching a federal hate crime. On the other hand, Republicans are working on a plan that works at eliminating rogue police officers.
I'm all for social work and mental health. But call me old-fashioned. I think you may actually want a police officer to stop a criminal and arrest him before we try to work through his feelings.
This week, both President Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden have made it clear they are against defunding the police. Trump has described Democrats who are supporting the effort as, quote, radical. Meanwhile, a state rep from St. Louis is proposing police reforms for Missouri. Democratic Representative Steve Roberts is hoping to ban police practices like chokeholds and putting weight or force on a restrained person's neck. He says, quote, it is my hope that the practice can be banned in our state and that we might never have to hear those awful words, I can't breathe, from someone in police custody again. Roberts is also the chairman of the Missouri Legislative Black Caucus. For the first time in U.S. history, a black man will serve as a service chief in the military. The Senate unanimously confirmed General Charles Q. Brown Jr. today as Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Days before this historic vote, the general posted a video on Twitter talking about his experience as a black man in the military and the racism he faced. He said his nomination provides hope, but also comes with a heavy burden.
I can't fix centuries of racism in our country, nor can I fix decades of discrimination that may have impacted members of our Air Force. I want the wisdom and knowledge to lead, participate in, and listen to necessary conversations on racism, diversity, and inclusion. I want to hear what you're thinking about and how together we can make a difference.
Recently, all military service chiefs issued statements calling for the need to address the issue of race among their ranks. A black NASCAR driver is working to ban Confederate flags from the racetrack. The driver told CNN his goal was to, quote, get rid of all Confederate flags at NASCAR races because people who attend shouldn't have to feel uncomfortable. The topic has been discussed since 2015, but there's been no official ban from NASCAR events. Long lines, lack of voting machines, and a shortage of primary ballots. Georgia's Secretary of State called for investigations across Georgia today, the day of the state's primary. The voting was rescheduled back in March due to COVID-19. Issues with voting machines and card readers forced residents to either come back at a later time or pass on their vote. At some Atlanta voting stations, lines were up to 4 hours long and in the rain.
But I had mailed in an absentee ballot about 4 weeks ago and never got it, so.
Georgia's Secretary of State claimed problems were in certain precincts. An update to a missing persons case that crossed state borders and made national news. Police say they have found human remains at an Idaho home belonging to the stepfather of 2 children who went missing in September. Authorities took Chad Daybell into custody for questioning earlier today. The remains are yet to be identified. Today, the World Health Organization tried to clear up confusing comments about the spread of COVID-19. Earlier, a top WHO expert said the virus spread by asymptomatic people was rare. Today, that expert said she was referring to a few studies, not a complete picture.
I think what's important related to transmission is what we know, importantly, what we don't know, and what we're trying to do to really understand this very complex question.
The previous comments directly contradicted guidance from public health organizations, including the CDC. Coming up in a KOMU8 exclusive, one Mizzou graduate creates a shift in the NFL and its stance on racial injustice. Meet the man behind this video that went viral and forced change. Plus, a tropical depression rolled through mid-Missouri this morning. More on what some areas saw flooding.
And you can see winds, not too bad right now, but it's going to really start to get windy tomorrow. You can see these are current winds and now wind gusts. It's going to be a windy Wednesday for us. Tracking that hour by hour and our next chance for rain coming up.
Coming up tomorrow on KOMU8 News Today.
After days of protesting in Columbia, some change could be coming. How the Columbia Citizens Police Review Board could be changing its mission statement.